I could not have done it without this community, my family, my BOEC family. So you guys made this trip possible, because I would not have come through that without the excellent foods I never thought I would like that I devoured. You made our lives just so much easier, and the support that I received was just amazing. And so if, God forbid, any of you are going through this or know someone who's going through it and needs to deal with it, it's one of those things that unfortunately, until you've walked that road, you really don't know what it's like. And so if any of you at any time need me or need Phyl to help navigate this, because unfortunately it's a path that many people have walked and many people will walk, I'll be there for you the same way this community was there for me. So thank you.
And I'm going to just add to that. The rabbi's also been talking all day today about gratitude, and I am so grateful not only to the community for the support everyone showed us, but to the fact that Neil is healthy and we were actually able to do this journey. I want to say, we have this set up as a presentation. We could talk about this for hours. We're trying to contain it in an hour, but we also want to really make sure that you all have the opportunity to ask any questions or participate in the conversation too. So, you want to give us the first slide? Yeah, I can't see that. I can't read anything on it. And I just found out, for us, bicycle touring in the summer, and those of you that know us know this, bicycle touring in the summer is a way of life for us. It is our preferred mode of exploration. It's the adventure that we put into our life. And so it was really important that we do it this year. Because of Neil's illness, we planned it a little bit differently than it has been done in the past. We've always camped, and much more than we've stayed in hotels, etc. We decided not to bring any camping gear with us. Maybe a mistake. We also decided, the doctors had said that we should plan on doing half the distance per day that we normally did. So I was looking, I'm the one that initially plans the route, and I'm the one that plans the route and navigates, yeah.
We'd still be in Europe if I was in charge of directions.
Going in circles. So anyway, I was looking for a place that we could go just 25 miles or so a day, and that meant Europe rather than the U.S. And we've done that before in Europe, and it's been very easy. Every 25 miles or so, there we are at a guest house or a campground or a pension or something. Yeah, not so true in the parts of Europe we were in this year. And I also wanted someplace much flatter, because everywhere we go, no matter what we think we're getting into, it always ends up mountainous. So this was, in fact, a flat trip. But one of the things that happened with it was that planning before you go and planning when you get there are two different things. And because there were not actually lodging places every 25 miles or so, we ended up with this zigzag that you see on the route. Some of that was by plan. The initial zigzag was to get to the town that Neil's family was from, but after that, most of those zigs and zags were trying to figure out ways to get to lodging. And the other thing I want to mention about the map is that red dotted line. If you've ever done any bike touring, and I know some of you have, as a matter of fact, I just met a gentleman who did a very similar trip and biked across Europe looking for his family roots also. I don't know where you are, John, back there. But for those of you who tour, you know that flexibility is the word of the hour. Flexibility and serendipity, and you will hear us talk about both of those things. So We figured out at one point that we did not have enough days left to get to Riga by the time our flight was going home. And so that red line is 150 miles of train ride from Augusta, Poland to Vilnius.
That said, the total mileage on the trip was 780 miles. Sounds better in kilometers. Little over 1,100. And part of the reason that Phyl picked this was that Phyl had always wanted to explore her family roots. Me, not so much. My father emigrated, and parents emigrated from Poland in 1920. My grandmother came as an indentured servant. One of the big mysteries of the family was what happened to my grandfather, because I used to get in trouble whenever I asked about him. It was just nothing that was discussed. My mother and siblings, which are over on this, and her two brothers were left in the care of family in Skępa, Poland. We knew that much. But aside from that, we had all these questions that never got answered. When they came to America, they left the old country behind. And I read a quote recently about a gentleman whose mother was from Skępa and then went to the camps and survived and went to Israel. And he said that there was a reason our family left. It wasn't for all of them that wonderful a place. And in my family, like I said, when they left, they became Americans. That was the world they left behind, and they were going to make the most of their opportunities in the new world. Those that didn't leave were killed in the Shoah. And we've since gotten a lot of documentation about the ghettos they were exported to and the camps.
Next slide, please.
So we started our trip by flying the bike into Warsaw. You'll see some pictures later of the packing, etc. Warsaw has a wonderful museum, the Poland Museum of Jewish History. It traces 1,000 years of Jews in Poland. And so far, it still does so in a very honest and ethical manner. But it traces our history, our relationship with the Polish people, the Jewish relationship with the church in Poland. And if you ever do go to Warsaw, it is a must stop.
Have any of you been there? I'm sure I know people. Yeah, a lot of you have been there. Okay, great.
The memorial on the left is the memorial to the Warsaw Ghetto. We've all heard of the Warsaw Ghetto. The Warsaw Ghetto uprising was pointed out to us, many of the folks my age in their childhood as where the Jews fought back. Well, what's not known, and I never grew up knowing, is that there were 600 other ghettos set up by the Nazis and the Poles in Poland. 600. And in virtually every one of them, it reached a point where there was an uprising. So the myths that Jews went placidly to their deaths is totally untrue. We fought when we had the opportunity to fight. But rocks and sticks really don't do much against bullets and guns. The middle slide, if you can see it.
No, the far slide. You just talked about it.
No, the one in the middle is the outline of the Warsaw Ghetto. The ghetto took up 1.3 miles, and at its peak, before the uprising, had 470,000 people pushed into this area. And as I said, it was only one of 600 ghettos. On the far right is the Warsaw Cemetery, Jewish cemetery. And they are in the midst of trying to restore it and rebuild it. And keep in mind that we have 1,000 years of history in Poland.
Next slide, please. So before we went, I wanted to see if I could find out some information, that we'd be prepared, we'd know where we were going to go, et cetera. And Sherry Cornrich, I don't think she's here, actually connected me with a friend of hers who had done a very similar trip, not on a bicycle, but a similar trip in Poland, who told us that she told me to contact the administrator of the Poland Museum, that he had helped her find her roots and had really done great research for her. I contacted him and he said, I don't do this anymore, but Gregory Charbonneau does. And the man standing next to me in that picture is Gregory. And you're going to hear a lot about him throughout this presentation. He was amazing. And so he not only did research on our family that gave us a lot of information, and he spent 2 days of his own time taking us around to see sites, and we didn't really know that many family members were from there until Gregory translated some documents that we had. We actually have documents, and I have a couple of them with us, copies of them, that are in Polish about the family, and Gregory translated all of those, and it turned out that they were things like Neil's grandfather's birth certificate. And yeah, Selfie Michal is a docent there and spent a lot of time with us in the Jewish section of the museum. Next slide.
So this show shows Plosk. I can't really say it, so.
So the joke was, whenever we tried to tell people we were from or going to Plosk, they didn't know what we were talking about because we weren't pronouncing it right. And the L in Polish is, and things like that. But he said to me, think of the L as wa, like water, and the C is...
The Reubensteins and the Adlers that I knew owned a bakery in Skempa, the Grunbergs, the Kirchhocks, who was my...
Michal Reubenstein, who was Neil's great uncle. We had never even heard of him before. He raised all of his children in this apartment. You can see what it looked like, our hotel. We did not know that. We didn't know where the address was when we went. Surviving Reubenstein of that generation. She is 98 or 99 years old. We just saw her. Very good chance that she did as well, but we don't know that for certain.
And her father was a shochet in the town of Plosk. So the town of a shochet is a ritual slaughterer. So Plosk had a Jewish population of around 2,000. And many of the small towns outside Warsaw, outside the large cities, had majority Jewish populations. We tended to live more isolated in Poland. We had our areas where only the Jews were. We were limited in what our jobs occupations were, but we made up a significant number in the world. So this is the home of Reubenstein. Next slide, please.
And this is the slide, this is the home of one of the Adler families. Again, we didn't know they had been in Plosk at all. Gregory found this for us, and it was one of the Adler bakers. That will come into play again later. And the building is the same. You can see what it looks like outside. And I was able to walk inside to this building, and I have to say, it was pretty powerful to walk into there. I could just imagine the Adler family coming down the stairs in their Shabbos clothes, going up the stairs with their groceries. The feeling was really palpable, and it was pretty exciting to be there. Next slide. There were two synagogues in Plosk, the Great Synagogue and the Minor Synagogue. The Great Synagogue was destroyed during the war. It is currently just a field. This was the Minor Synagogue. Today it is the Mazavian Museum, Mazavian Jewish Museum. Mazavia is like the state that Plosk and Skempa is in, and this holds the museum. You can see the ark that was built in the 1850s in the 1947 photo, and then you can see us standing in front of it, refurbished in the museum. And again, all we can say is, this was the shul in the town where Neil's family was. They were Orthodox. Chances are pretty good that they were saying Aliyah.
The Hasidic movement started in Poland in the late 1600s. My family evidently were rabbis as early as the early part of the 1800s.
I actually have some documents with me that show
I'm
that.
going to be exploring that one in the future. Next slide, please. Slide. 1941, Nazis came in, rounded up all the Jews in Plosk. There's probably family members there. They were sent to other ghettos in Skempa, and to the death camps. They were sent to the Warsaw Ghetto as well, and then to the death camps in Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor.
And as we talk, go ahead. So I don't have a map with me, but
It's
it is
150 kilometers, 120 miles northwest of Warsaw.
Yeah, that's why that first jag and that from Warsaw, we went that way.
So this was one of your first stops?
This was the first stop.
This was the first
after
stop.
Warsaw, sorry.
And it's about 20 miles from the town of Skampa that I knew my family was from. Plosk was never spoken about.
We got that from Gregory. We didn't realize that we had all this family in Plosk.
So you were planning to go here.
We were planning on going straight to Skempa. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
did you have reservations at places?
So when we tour, our preferred method is not to have reservations. Sometimes you're on the bike and you get someplace and you go, oh, that's really cool, let's stay here. Or you get to the place you thought you were going that day and you go, ew. Right. And so this trip we did make more reservations than normal, partly because we didn't have camping gear with us, and partly because by the time we got on the plane, we did know we were going to Plosk, and so we had made that reservation ahead.
The standard, go ahead, please.
How far back is Gregory able to locate your family?
Not as far back as we would have liked. 1800s. I think 1870s. It was great greats. Yeah. But when we went, when I was planning this, one of the reasons I wanted to do it was because I had always heard, Jews can't find their ancestors in Europe past the Second World War, right? And about 15 or 20 years ago, I was watching a show called Who Do You Think You Are? Some of you may have seen it. It's a genealogy show. And Rashida Jones was on it. She was the daughter of Peggy Lipton, who was Jewish, and Quincy Jones. And she had Quincy Jones had done all kinds of research. She had all that information. She was looking for information on her Jewish roots. And they sent her to Riga because Riga has archives that have all the records back centuries upon centuries upon centuries. That's where my grandparents were from. And that was part of what motivated this trip.
And as Phil said, the joke in the family was, I just survived cancer, don't let her kill me on the bike. So doing 60 miles every day was not something we wanted to do. That lasted till the second day.
Second day out of Warsaw, we did a kilometer a century. We did 109 kilometers. It was 66 miles.
Which made me knew I can do it, which was the good side.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
So this is just a little piece about Gregory. Why does Gregory do this? First of all, this is in that museum/synagogue, and when Gregory was a child, his mother, he was born the same year as Neil in 1953, and his mother worked in the synagogue that was functioning as a community center at that time. And he went with her every day to work. And I'm going to read his words here, if I can see them in the slide. I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I could read. I entered the synagogue through the southern door, turned left, and suddenly, for the first time, my attention was caught by 2 matching plaques hanging on the wall above my head. I stopped right in front of them and tried with all my strength to read what was written on the plaques. To my surprise, I couldn't read a single word, didn't know my letters. I'm having trouble reading this, so I'm just going to tell you. Basically, he came in, he saw these plaques, he couldn't read them, he couldn't understand them, he didn't know what they were. He was too shy to ask about them. 8 or 9-year-olds, right? Those plaques never left his mind. Years later, when they were restoring the synagogue into a museum, he went and asked about the plaques. People knew what he was talking about, but the plaques had been lost. He, on his own, started a project to get them recreated. Now, what I didn't say is Gregory is an observant Catholic. Why does he do this? He does this because of the women that he met in that synagogue when he was a child, and because he believes that the memories and the knowledge of these people should live on, and that if we don't do it now, it's not going to exist. He does it all for free. He does not charge a penny. So what the plaque said, Neil, will you read him? Because I can't see him.
And you shall tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I went free from Egypt. Exodus 13:8. In memory of the children who perished in the Holocaust, murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators, who were unable to fulfill the commandment of, and you shall teach your children. May their memory be a blessing. And to remember the souls of the millions of Jews, our brothers and sisters, who were murdered in sanctification of God's name, and who did not merit to reach the land of Israel and to be buried within it.
Next slide.
So Plosk, as it turned out, was about 20 miles from Skempa, the shtetl that I had always heard about growing up. And I had 2 family members who previously went to Skempa. One, Naomi Wasserman, who was one of 3 survivors on my mother's side of the family. She was taken from Skempa to Auschwitz, survived Auschwitz, emigrated to Israel with 2 of her brothers. Those were the only 3 remnants of the extended Kurtz family. My cousin Elise, who was an Adler, also went in 2013, and the pictures that we see, the house from 2013 and the back of the house, we were told that the house no longer existed. They were wrong, and the house looks very much like the pictures from 2013. My family, I knew, had a bakery, and we were told it was the best bakery, of course, in Skempa, which was a town of about 2,500 Jews in the town, and they all lived in this one section. The bakery in 2013 with a red roof, and in 2025, it has gone back to being a business, not a bakery, but it was fully restored. So that was my family's bakery for I don't know how many years in that town.
I just want to add one piece about the house being demolished. The first thing we did when we got to Skempa was we went to the town hall, thinking that if there were any records, that would be where we would find them. And the first 3 or 4 people that we were introduced to said, no, there's no Jewish records, there's no Jewish records, there's no Jewish records. And then they brought in another woman. I don't know what her position was. She had a private office. Again, not a lot of English. We're trying to get, we're using a lot of Google Translates, but she took us into her office and she tried to call a woman, who is their town historian, but that person was not available. So she told us that she would get information for us, and she has continued to do that. I just, in the past week, got a lot of information that told us that Adler, whose house we saw in Płock, had been sent to, had died in a ghetto in Płock, which is not the same as Płock. But she's continued to send us information. But she said to us that the house she knew the house, she knew the Adler house, and it had been torn down. It clearly hadn't, we saw it. But she also told us, next slide please, that the cemetery no longer existed, that there was absolutely nothing we could see and no reason to even go look for the cemetery.
In 2020, there has been an ongoing project throughout Europe to find the remnants of Jewish cemeteries. And what you see Phyl standing next to is a memorial plaque to the cemetery in Skempa. We followed the road up to the hill. It was in a beautiful site overlooking the river. We found the remnants of a mausoleum.
Yeah, and in the upper right-hand corner, it's hard to see, but that is, there's a stone base under the gravestones. Gravestones themselves had all been taken and used as building supplies by the locals, but there were these base stones. There were about a half dozen of those, and the outline of the mausoleum, and in the bottom center, because I give tours of the Breckenridge Cemetery, I knew what I was looking at, is an indentation where there clearly had been graves as well.
And the site was absolutely beautiful, but it was also obvious that
A mess.
it was a drinking site for the local teens, as a lot of cemeteries in our country are. So Phil and I were able to spend 10, 15 minutes just cleaning it up. And
Saying
we
Kaddish.
recited your site when we left, and it was probably one of the most powerful moments of the tour, because this was where generations of my family had been interred.
Next slide. Yeah, and there were a lot of powerful emotional moments, but yes, that was
So
definitely-
Gregory, as I said, an observant Catholic, called me to task on how observant I was as a Jew, which was rather
Multiple times
entertaining.
he kept talking to us about how we needed to go to shul more, and that keeping kosher at home wasn't enough, and yeah.
But he was also our source for anything we came across that was Catholic that we had no idea what we were looking at.
And we rode, I know we're not talking a lot about the biking itself, and we're happy to answer questions about it, but we felt like the focus should really be on the heritage piece. But as we were biking through the countryside, and we biked pretty much through Iowa, Nebraska, and Kansas. It was we had no idea, because we have biked those states. It was literally biking the breadbasket. And if we have time at the end, I have a couple of slides attached that I can show you. But every plot of land, there was some kind of Catholic monument. The first one over in the corner, Gregory told me, is called a holy. It is a sculpture of a tree with a suffering Jesus in it. The two in the middle are obviously crosses. They are just called crosses, but they are put there for protection. And then on the far right is a statue of Jesus enclosed. They're called Marias, and I think many of them are statues of Mary.
It's either Jesus or the Virgin Mary.
Right.
And there's probably as many statues that we ran across of the Virgin Mary as we did of Jesus.
Okay. Next slide, please. This is just, so yeah, we're going through the countryside, and we're going zigging and zagging wherever we need to go in order to get to places where we can stay, to lodging. And it was pretty surprising to us, I think, that we would be in a town, and small town, and all of a sudden there would be something that told about the Jewish population of that town. In the case on the left here, it was, excuse me, it was just a sign in the town square about a cemetery that was a general cemetery, but it said in the sign that there was a Jewish section, and this was the picture they had of the cemetery. And when you're on a bike, for any of you who tour, when you're on a bicycle, it's not a matter of, okay, there's a cemetery that's 10 miles or 10 kilometers that way, let's go see it. This cemetery was in the opposite direction, about 10 kilometers away, so we did not get to this one. But evidently it exists.
The picture on the far right was a medieval castle that went back to the 12th century. And we toured the castle. It had been destroyed and rebuilt several times throughout its history. And we were talking with the docent who had given us a tour, and he asked why we were there and what we were doing. And we explained that we were following, in part, our Jewish heritage, that my family had immigrated, Phil's family from Latvia. And then he gave us a bit of Jewish history. The wall that you see, when the Nazis came into town, they took all of the Jews that lived in this town, brought them to the castle, lined them up against the wall that you see, and they were executed. So, as Phyl said, we found history in unexpected places, much of which
It was pretty emotional.
was along that line.
Go ahead, next slide, please. There are no Bialys in Bialystok, just in case you were wondering.
So those of you that know what a Bialy is, all right, you got it. Bialys are one of my favorite things in the world. And about 10 years ago, the matriarch of Phil's family, a wonderful woman by the name of Lucille Mabel, Lucille was in the habit of finding books that she thought people would be interested in and mailing it to them.
She was 97 years
She
old.
was 97 years old at the time. And I received a book on the history of the Bialy and Bialystok. And I always wanted to go there. So even though it was way out of the way, we decided
Way
that
out
we
of the
had to
way.
go to Bialystok.
Way out of the,
Turns
way
out
out of the way. But there were places to stay.
I was hungry, you know? And the food we were eating was the food that we grew up with. I ate more variations on latkes than you could ever
And blintzes.
imagine. And blintzes and pierogies and different things. So Bialystok is the 10th largest city in Poland, and it's a university town. Medical school, university, and we found that in 2008, some students had put together the Jewish history of Bialystok, 36 sites, and they had everything mapped out.
Supposedly, there wasn't a map as such, but supposedly you could go from site to site to site. We found 7 sites. And it took us all day long, including 2.5 hours searching for what we thought was the most important site, which is what you see in the photo. This is a memorial to the Great Synagogue. And 2.5 hours to find this memorial. And it was the Great Synagogue there. When the Nazis came into town, they rounded up 2,000 Jews, put them into the synagogue, locked the door, and set it on fire. So this is the memorial to that site. And one thing I do want to say, we're talking a lot about, we were following this trail, and a lot of what we saw was what happened in the Shoah and also during the Soviet age. But I want to say that we also found a lot of things that talked about the really rich Jewish culture that existed for 1,000 years before the Shoah.
So in Bialystok, it was also known for one of the major uprisings that took place before the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. And Bialystok has placed memorials, and those were some of what we found were memorials to the people that started the uprising and to the Jews that died in the uprising. And as I said, keep in mind that there were 600 ghettos spread throughout Poland.
Next slide, please. So this is just to show, let me say that if we were on The Amazing Race, we would have been eliminated in Bialystok. We couldn't find anything, but part of it was that it was really hard to find these things. And so this is an example of that. This was one of the synagogues. There were numerous synagogue buildings still standing in Bialystok. This was one of them. And on the front of the building, way up high, out of sight, you had to be looking for it, was this black plaque telling that it had been a synagogue. And then around the back of the building, there was a parking lot. I think I edited the cars out of it. And you could see the remnants of what had been the stained glass windows that are all cemented in. And also, Rabbi, can you tell what that is in the middle? It's the Ark. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Oh, go ahead.
It's interesting because the impression I'm getting from you is that the Polish people are very aware of what happened to the Polish Jews. And they are very, I'm trying to think of the word,
I'm going to let Neil speak to it. This is part of Neil's feeling
what's
about the whole
happening
trip.
in Poland is the same thing that's happening in America. There is a government that has decided to rewrite the history of Poland. And just like we're hearing about slavery and things that are unpleasant in our museums being taken out, the same thing is starting to happen in Poland. Yes.
And a couple of other things about that. I just lost my train of thought. I lost my train of thought, never mind.
So there is,
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
how can I phrase this politely? There is a deniability of collaboration that has been going on since the Shoah. To the Polish government and to
Holocaust.
many Poles since the Holocaust, it is the evil Germans that were responsible, and we were only following orders.
From what I'm seeing you say here, like from this guy that helps you,
It's not true universally. And there are folks who have accepted the role that there were Polish collaborators, and there are other folks like Gregory that, for their reasons, believe that the Jewish society in Poland needs to be commemorated. But the government is taking steps to remove much of the history of the Shoah. In fact,
What?
in Poland, if you blame the Polish people for the Shoah, it is against the law.
And
and I've never heard the word the whole.
Shoah, it's Yiddish or Hebrew? Hebrew? Hebrew. Yeah, it's a Hebrew word for the Holocaust. Yeah, one of the things that I came to understand on this trip is sort of how this could happen, but it was surprising to me. Any place that there were signs about what had happened, it talked about the Poles, the Jews, and other groups. If you could be a Polish Jew or a German Jew, but you were not considered Polish or German. You were a Jew. And so that's part of how the separation was able to take place. And all the signs that talk about anything will say, the Polish population was this, or it will say, and the Jewish population was this, or it will say, I'm trying to think of other examples. It's very...
They were denying that the Jews.
There was not an assimilation of the Jews in the population of Poland.
No. Exactly.
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 We were considered different, and that still exists to this very day.
Yeah, and it would say things like, this is a monument to the Poles who were killed by the Nazis, and so many Jews were killed here also. I mean, there were signs like that. So yeah, that answers your question.
So many Jews were killed and then so many Poles.
Yeah.
So, for instance, there were 5 mass graves
What about time?
outside the town of Skempa that were found after the war. And it was referred to as 5,000 Poles, 1,000 Jews, and 1,000 others were murdered on this site. So even in today's history, in today's world, even though the Jews made significant contributions, you had a population, Jews were 14.5% of the population of Poland. They were still separated out then in where we can live, the jobs that we can hold, and separated out even now in the history. And when we ask, how can you rewrite history? Not to get political, folks, but we're seeing it, every day in our country.
Next slide.
Phil, no, go back.
Go back?
You didn't talk about Vilnius.
Oh,
Go.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize we had already moved.
Yep.
So, talked about pivoting. We kept hearing from everybody we met, all the people who were camping and bike touring through the area. Everyone said, you have to go to Vilnius, you have to go to Vilnius. We knew there was a rich Jewish history there, but it was way out of our way. We realized that we weren't going to get from where we were to Riga in the time allotted, and there were trains that went to Vilnius that would allow us to skip that 150 miles we needed to skip, and was kind of the minimum we could skip, and take us to Vilnius. So we did spend a couple of days in Vilnius. And in Vilnius, there were a number of really, and some of you have probably done the Jewish tours there, I'm guessing, number of inexpensive Jewish history tours. And so we did spend a day doing that. Our tour guide, who you can see down in the corner over there, pointing out the outline of the ghettos. There were 2 ghettos in Vilnius. A large and a small was what they called them. The small one had 40,000 residents. Okay? But one of the things she told us was, and this was without us saying anything about our experience in Bialystok, she said, without a tour guide, you would spend days trying to find some of these sites. And the example of that is the memorial to the great synagogue that's hidden between the bushes there. And then in the middle section, those are several of what were called the walls remember, I think. I may not have that exactly right, but it's something like the walls remember, or yeah. And what they did was they took photos of late 1800 and early 1900 Jewish scenes in the Jewish sections, the actual photos, and they have reproduced them on walls throughout the Jewish section as those people are there. Yeah, Bruce.
What does that say to you that it's so hard to find things, yet they are there, they haven't destroyed them?
Right.
Yeah.
What's the message you get from the country?
I found it to be a very mixed message.
Yeah.
In Lithuania, there were 150,000 Jews. 110,000 died in the Holocaust, in the Shoah. Many were sent to camps. Many were also taken out into the countrysides and fields, and they were executed. Lithuania, I found, was a very, while some of the monuments were hard to find, they're still working to preserve them and working in ways that some of the other countries weren't. I found both Baltic states that we visited, Lithuania and Latvia, to be proud of the contributions that Jews made to the history. They acknowledged that there were collaborators within that worked with the Nazis against the Jews, but at the same time, there were many righteous in Lithuania and in Latvia that at the cost of their own lives protected the Jews in their cities, in their villages. In Lithuania and Latvia, Jews were much more assimilated. We were allowed to have a wide variety of jobs. We were allowed to do things in those countries that we were not allowed to do in many other countries of Europe, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please.
So, many of you know Stoppelstones, right?
20 minutes? Yeah.
10 minutes. 10 minutes, okay.
We'll speed it up.
This was probably one of my favorite things that happened. On that tour, you know, the Stoppelstones, Stumblestones, is everyone aware what those are? I think so, yeah. Did I hear some no's? I'm sorry. Basically, they have put these these brass markers in sidewalks outside of places where Jews lived before they were murdered in the Holocaust. And they are all over Germany. They have just started them in Vilnius. There are 18. And the tour guide took us to tell us about them and to show us these. And I don't think you can see it, but the woman's name is Fania Lavando. Now, she told us the story of this woman who she started a kosher vegetarian restaurant. And and everyone laughed at her. Why? No one's going to come to a Jewish restaurant, to a vegetarian restaurant, sorry. And everyone laughed. She was very successful. She was so successful that she wrote a cookbook in 1839.
1938.
What did I say?
1839.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
1938. She was way ahead of her time. She wrote a cookbook. And then she was murdered in the Holocaust. Now, before we ever went on this trip, my future daughter-in-law, last January, brought me this book. This is the reprint. They have just started reproducing this cookbook, translated into English. But it's the cookbook that was written by Fanny Lavando. So it's probably one of my favorite things. Next slide, please.
There's one remaining synagogue in Vilnius. As we were coming from the train station, we took a photo on the left and said, boy, what a neat looking building. Later, when we went back to it as a synagogue tour, we realized it was the last remaining synagogue in Vilnius. Beautifully preserved. There is an active Chabad.
Yeah, so it's not a Chabad house. It is the one active congregation, but the rabbi is Chabad.
One of the things the rabbi mentioned earlier, on the bottom in the middle picture, you can see the picture of the ark with the sign of the Kohanim over the ark.
Or the Vulcans, depending on
And
how you choose to look at it.
The picture in the middle, if you can make it out, is a masa making machine that dates back to the 1800s, no longer in use.
Next slide. So, Litvox. Are any of you Litvox? Does anyone know if they're a Litvok? Okay, so I grew up, the guy down in the bottom there is my father. I grew up with him talking all the time about how we were Litvox, and he was so proud of it, and the language was a little different. He and my mother spoke different dialects of Yiddish, and the food was better, and Litvox, Litvox, Litvox. And I never knew what it meant. I thought, okay, so maybe that means, where they came from or something. I had no idea. Turns out that on our tour, we found out that this guy over on the left, who's called the Genius of Vilnius, was the founder of the Litvak movement. As a 14-year-old, he was a seer, a genius, who started this sect of Judaism. And basically, he felt that they were the more intellectual, they were better than the Hasids. All sort of the things my father said that I never really understood. And so the area that Lithuania at the time was much larger, and it included parts of Belarus, northern Poland, northern Ukraine, all of Lithuania, and part of Latvia. And that will be important in just a second. But the third picture on there, anyone recognize it? We talked about him earlier today.
Leonard Cohen.
It is Leonard Cohen. Yeah. When we were talking about Shrek, I was thinking, yeah.
And he was a Litvak.
He was
and
a Litvak.
They're very proud of Leonard Cohen in Lithuania.
They have claimed him as their native son.
Next slide. We got to hurry this up a little bit.
Skip it, Neil. Not important.
We're going to quickly, you end up in places that you don't expect. We ended up in the town of Kanave, totally by accident. It is a UNESCO heritage site. It is one of the oldest settlements in Lithuania, dating back to the 9th century. And Lithuania, we found, the reason that they were much more receptive to the Jews is that they were pagan up until about the 1500s. So everyone was welcome. They didn't become a Christian nation until much later in their history. And this was one of the more fascinating sites that we went to.
Next slide. Just another sign that we came across in a small town that told both about what happened to the Jews in the Holocaust and also the culture that had been there before. Next slide. You know what? I think we've got 3 minutes, Neil. I'm going to skip to Riga. Okay?
Okay.
So if we can go ahead and ahead and ahead. There. Okay. So the whole goal of the trip was to get to my family in Riga. And
Brilliant movie.
And it says mission accomplished. Yes, we made the bike ride. I did not kill Neil along the way, despite the length of many of our days. And so that was mission accomplished. What wasn't accomplished is all the information we found out about Neil's family, we found nothing about mine. Next slide. So There are not people like Gregory. I contacted the Jewish Museum. I contacted all kinds of places trying to get someone to help me. I could not get an appointment at the archives. I could not find anyone who would help me do the research. And finally, I ended up finding these two gentlemen, Petrus and Uldis. Uldis has done the genealogy for 500 Jewish families. And what he said to me, I sent him tons of information, tons. Names, birth dates, places they lived, marriage dates, all kinds of things, and he found 0. And what he said he had never found that situation before, having that much information going into it, and that what he thinks is that my family came to these places from other places. So, for example, my grandfather may have been born, actually my grandmother, I have reason to believe, may have been born in Kiev rather than Kuldiga, which is a suburb of Riga where all the Jews lived. She may have been born in Kiev, and so because she came to Kuldiga later, there was no birth certificate. Her parents' marriage certificate wasn't there. And so there are no records there, and maybe that's not where the origins actually were. And the last thing I'm going to say, because I know we have to wrap up, is that that night we went to Shul in Riga. And that was another interesting story, but the point I want to make about it is we met a woman who was also there searching for her family, and her grandmother had left Kuldiga the same time my grandmother had left there. They had lived there at the same time. And she went to ChatGPT and said, tell me what a little girl's life in Kuldiga in 1905 was like. And it said she would have got up in the morning and gone shopping in the town square, and then she would have gone to the synagogue, and then she would have spent the afternoon swimming by the falls. We visited all those places, and I like to think that my grandmother did all those things. Final slide. Yep, till next time. Happy, I know that there's another program that's supposed to start, so we're gonna get out of here, but do feel free to come and ask us questions and whatever.
Is this on? That was just totally wonderful. As Aviva's getting her stuff together, you know, the Musar movement, which I discussed this morning during my sermon, is actually a Litvak invention. And the reason why Chassidut is much more known in America and the Hasidic movement is because most of the community, of the Litvak community, didn't make it to the United States. And those that did survive went to Israel. So the Musar movement, and you have reason to be proud. I don't know if anybody here has German heritage. German Jews, I didn't know that that was a thing versus like I'm a Polish Jew. But if you were a German Jew, you knew you were a German Jew. And you're not. Are you a German Jew? Oh, his step monster was a German Jew. Well, I'm saying, but it's the same thing about the same thing about Litvaks and Hasids. And in the Jewish world, the Hasids, which are now seen as being, you know, the epitome of Jewish life, were shunned upon. They were not the intellectuals at all. They were not the Torah scholars at all. So this Litvak tradition really, to this day, continues as being something to be incredibly proud of. We're not actually going to take any time between our two programs because we definitely want Aviva to get some time before she'll be singing for the Mincha service. But I invite you to stay. This is going to be a really interesting, musical, and fascinating program. And thank you for being here.
So it's going to be here rather than in the library?
Yeah, we wanted to have it here so that we didn't all have a big transition time. So if you're willing to come up closer, that might be easier. And I'm going to take Phil's microphone and give it to...
I'm good. It's a small